The heavy gold nib hovered over the parchment for a fraction of a second before King Charles signed his name, officially issuing an emergency Royal Prerogative Decree. Under constitutional law, this order carries absolute sovereign authority, instantly stripping the Queen of access to the Crown private archives and reducing her once exclusive keycard to a useless piece of plastic. Courtiers stood in frozen disbelief as security personnel sealed the heavy oak doors of the Clarence house vault. This ruthless purge was not a sudden burst of malice, but the direct consequence of a quiet betrayal exposed just hours earlier. During an unannounced administrative audit of the royal estate, Prince William uncovered a paper trail that laid bare 27 years of deliberate concealment. Buried beneath layers of altered inventory records sat Princess Diana's lost emerald bracelet, tucked alongside a private letter meant for her eldest son. The mechanism was simple, calculated, and devastating. By altering catalog entries to register the jewel as permanently decommissioned, Queen Camilla Inner Circle had effectively erased the relic from public memory, ensuring that Diana's lingering presence would never overshadow the current reign. But the heir to the throne dismantled that illusion in a single afternoon. Within hours of the discovery, the emeralds were quietly delivered to Kensington Palace, where the Princess of Wales wore them before a wall of international cameras, signaling the total restoration of Diana's legacy. Yet behind this victory lies the quiet tragedy of a family torn apart by its own secrets, leaving a sovereign who traded his wife's dignity to preserve his son's trust. Was King Charles right to strip the Queen of her power to avenge his late wife? Or did Prince William force a sovereign father into an unforgiving act of betrayal against his own queen? Comment 1 if you stand with Prince William, or 2 if you believe the punishment went too far. The heavy mahogany door of the private study clicked shut, sealing out the whispered anxieties of the royal household. Prince William stood beside the central writing desk, his posture rigid and unyielding as the afternoon light cut through the tall windows of Clarence house. Upon the polished dark wood lay two distinct objects, a worn leather-bound administrative dossier open to a flagged page and a velvet case holding a striking bracelet of deep green emeralds. Without a word, the Prince of Wales motioned toward the desk, summoning the king to confront a truth that had been carefully buried beneath decades of institutional silence. King Charles stepped forward with measured, hesitant strides. The atmosphere inside the room was suffocatingly tense, heavy with the weight of an impending confrontation between a sovereign and his heir. Upon reaching the desk, the monarch reached out a hand that trembled almost imperceptibly. His fingers brushed against the cold gold framing the emeralds before closing around the clasp. Without looking at the paperwork, his thumb moved instinctively across the metal, tracing a subtle, raised line near the catch. It was a precise, invisible repair, a mend crafted long ago after the jewel had snapped during an intimate family gathering in the early 90s. That single, automatic physical gesture destroyed any possibility of ignorance. The king did not ask where the bracelet had been found, nor did he express surprise at its sudden reappearance. His thumb simply rested on the scar of the gold, a silent admission that he recognized the piece immediately. In the unspoken language of the royal court, that recognition was a devastating confession. It proved that the ruler of the realm had always known the bracelet existed, that he possessed full awareness of its unique history, and that its absence from the public domain was never an accident. For several agonizing moments, no voice broke the stillness of the study. The silence stretched between father and son, growing thicker with every passing second. In royal protocol, a formal denial would have established a legal defense, and an expression of confusion would have suggested an administrative failure. Instead, the king offered only an unmoving, somber silence. To the Prince of Wales, that quietude confirmed the most bitter reality of all. The sovereign had known that his late wife, precious heirloom, had been removed from the public inventory, Yet he had chosen to turn a blind eye, sacrificing his eldest son, rightful inheritance, to preserve a fragile domestic peace within his own household. With quiet, razor-sharp precision, Prince William turned the ledger toward his father, drawing attention to a series of official stamps and signatures dated years prior. Under royal administrative procedure, any transfer or preservation of historic items within the sovereign grant framework requires a verified audit trail signed by an authorized keeper of the privy purse. Yet the document on the desk bore a glaring anomaly. A high-ranking official attached directly to Queen Camilla private office had signed off on a specialized exemption order, officially classifying the emerald bracelet as withdrawn from routine audit for conservation purposes. The paperwork revealed a masterclass in bureaucratic deception. By routing the jewel through an obscure administrative clause reserved for delicate textile and gem restoration, the private office had effectively removed the item from the master catalogue without triggering an automatic alarm in the central royal treasury. No restoration facility had ever received the bracelet, no conservator had ever logged its arrival, and no return date had ever been scheduled. The entire paper trail was a ghost, a legal fiction created purely on paper to give the illusion of proper oversight, while the physical object was quietly stowed away in a locked cabinet. This was not a clerical oversight, nor was it a simple case of misplaced property during a routine relocation between royal residences. The evidence presented on the table pointed to a systematic, organized manipulation of the royal estate asset management structure. A network of trusted aides had utilized their official authority to bypass established protocols, falsifying ledger entries to legitimize the disappearance of a priceless piece of history. Every signature was deliberate, every form was calculated, and every stamp was applied with the specific intent of ensuring that the heir to the throne would never trace the jewel to its true location. Faced with the undeniable paper trail, the king stood completely stripped of authority and rhetoric. As the supreme head of the institution, he was responsible for the integrity of the crown records, yet those very records had been weaponized under his own roof to deprive his son of a mother legacy. The monarch remained silent, his eyes fixed on the forged signatures that exposed how his private office had been manipulated from within. There were no constitutional loopholes to invoke, no diplomatic explanations to offer, and no administrative excuses that could soften the reality of what had transpired. In that quiet room, the traditional balance of power shifted entirely. The Prince of Wales did not raise his voice or indulge in dramatic accusations, for the documents resting between them carried a lethal clarity that required no ornamentation. The investigation had moved far beyond the loss of a gold bracelet. It had laid bare a profound breach of trust at the very heart of the monarchy. The sovereign stood exposed before his successor, caught between the shadow of a past betrayal and the absolute, unyielding demand for immediate justice. To understand how a priceless piece of royal history vanished into the shadows, one must trace the paper trail back to the somber autumn of 1997. The setting was Kensington Palace, where the air was still heavy with the scent of millions of morning flowers piled against the iron gates. Inside the tall stone walls, a quiet, methodical process was underway, operated by a specialized team of household officials known as the Memorial Inventory Committee. Under established constitutional protocol, whenever a senior member of the royal family passes away, every item in their private collection must be meticulously catalogued, photographed, and assigned an official tracking code to determine its eventual legal disposition between the crown estate and private heirs. Among the hundreds of dresses, letters, and personal jewels laid out across the long oak tables of the sorting room, one specific item was processed with absolute priority. It was the emerald bracelet, a piece deeply bound to the late Princess of Wales. A senior archivist carefully placed the jewel inside a velvet-lined box, secured the latch, and attached a formal paper tracking tag. Upon that tag, written in bold black ink alongside the official inventory registration code, was the explicit instruction designating the recipient as Prince William. At 15 years old, grieving behind closed doors while the nation watched his every move, the young prince was legally designated as the sole heir to his mother's most cherished personal ornaments. However, that clear legal mandate immediately ignited a fierce, unyielding resistance behind closed doors. Camilla, then stepping cautiously into the peripheral frame of the royal household, viewed the distribution of these personal relics through a lens of deep insecurity and strategic preservation. In documented accounts from former household staff present during those tense weeks, she expressed intense unease regarding the permanent transfer of high-profile jewels to the young princes. Her objection was not rooted in financial value, but in emotional and political dominance. She argued that allowing these iconic treasures to remain active symbols within the family would ensure that Princess Diana's shadow would forever haunt every public engagement, every future marriage, and every generation to come, effectively preventing the family from establishing a new era. Caught between the intense emotional atmosphere following the funeral and the persistent demands of his companion, Prince Charles made a fateful compromise that opened the door to decades of deception. Seeking to suppress a brewing domestic crisis before it reached the press, the future king intervened in the committee work. He ordered that all disputed boxes containing personal heirlooms reserved for his sons be removed from the central sorting rooms at Kensington Palace and transferred immediately to a private storage suite under the direct control of his own personal office. Under royal estate regulations, a temporary protective custody order allows a senior royal to hold disputed property in trust until an heir reaches the age of majority, effectively suspending standard public audit requirements. That administrative loophole proved fatal to the integrity of the record. During the chaotic overnight transfer between palaces, while trucks moved sealed crates through the quiet courtyards, Camilla's private office seized the opportunity to act. Leveraging her growing influence over key household aides who managed the physical movement of the crates, she quietly instructed that the velvet case containing the emerald bracelet be separated from the master inventory shipment. While the official catalog continued to list the item as resting safely inside a secured royal vault, the physical object was quietly rerouted into a locked, unindexed cabinet within her personal dressing quarters. Thus, while a 15-year-old boy was forced to navigate the profound trauma of his mother's sudden absence, the tangible link to her memory was systematically erased from his reach. The paper tag bearing his name was folded flat and tucked beneath the velvet lining, hidden away alongside the stones. For 27 years, as Prince William grew into adulthood, married, and prepared for his own eventual reign, that stolen heirloom remained in the dark, protected by a wall of institutional silence and forged administrative entries. What was meant to be a mother-lasting gift to her eldest son had been transformed into a dirty secret of palace politics, buried deep inside a locked drawer. The heavy oak doors of the royal library at Clarence House clicked shut with absolute finality, isolating the three figures within from the bustling corridors of palace aides. Prince William had demanded this confrontation be stripped of any corporate buffer. No private secretaries, no legal advisors, and no communications strategists stood present to soften the blow. Surrounded by centuries of royal history, the Prince of Wales stood on one side of the vast mahogany table, his stance unyielding as he confronted King Charles and Queen Camilla. Upon the polished wood sat the velvet case holding the emerald bracelet alongside the freshly unsealed administrative dossier, a silent accusation waiting for an explanation. When confronted directly with the physical proof of the bracelet presence in her private dressing room, Queen Camilla attempted to construct a shield of administrative benevolence. She maintained a calm demeanor, offering a rehearsed defense that her retention of the jewel was merely a protective measure during the chaotic, repeated household moves between royal residences over the decades. She insisted that keeping the precious artifact close at hand was done entirely to prevent it from vanishing into the labyrinthine vaults of the royal collection, where hundreds of uncatalogued items had historically been lost to bureaucratic neglect. In her narrative, her intervention was not an act of theft, but a quiet effort to preserve a family heirloom from the hazards of institutional muddle. That fragile defense collapsed instantly under the weight of cold, hard documentation. Prince William did not raise his voice, but his words carried the cutting precision of an absolute mandate. He produced the internal logbooks and highlighted the forged exemption entries signed by her own private office. If preservation had truly been her sole intention, he pressed, why had the item been listed as officially decommissioned rather than properly registered in the Master Archive, where every valuable asset is tracked? He laid out the falsified conservation slips, pointing to the deliberate erasure of his name from the inventory control sheets. Faced with a flawless paper trail proving an organized cover-up, her polite excuses evaporated, leaving no room for plausible deniability. Trapped by the overwhelming audit evidence, the Queen's composure cracked, forcing her to reveal the darkest layer of the secrecy. She admitted that the emerald bracelet was only half of what she had secured inside that locked cabinet. Beneath the velvet lining lay an unopened green envelope containing a handwritten letter from Princess Diana, penned in the final months of her life. The revelation sent a visible shock through the room. King Charles shifted in his seat, his eyes widening as he realized that the concealment went far beyond a piece of jewelry, reaching directly into the final, unspoken personal wishes of his late wife. The contents of that suppressed letter carried a profound emotional and dynastic weight. In her unmistakable fluid script, Princess Diana had explicitly instructed that the emerald bracelet be handed directly to Prince William well before his future wedding day. Her wish was for her eldest son to hold absolute personal authority over the heirloom, allowing him to decide whether to offer it to the woman he chose to marry or to reserve it for future generations. Diana had trusted that, despite the fractured nature of the family, her final written instruction regarding her son's inheritance would be honored with absolute integrity by the institution she had left behind. Under relentless questioning from the Prince of Wales, Queen Camilla finally confessed to the raw, unvarnished motive behind 27 years of silence. She acknowledged that the existence of Diana's handwritten letter terrified her. The prospect of that note emerging prior to the royal wedding of 2011 represented an existential threat to her carefully constructed public image. She feared that a posthumous directive from Diana, delivered at the pinnacle of a global royal celebration, would instantly revive the ghost of the past, capturing the public imagination and completely overshadowing her own fragile position within the monarchy. To protect her standing and ensure the past remained buried, she chose to lock away both the jewel and the voice of the woman who wrote it, hoping time would erase what she dared not confront. The chilling confession hanging in the quiet air of the library left no room for compromise or diplomatic retreat. Confronted with the deliberate suppression of a deceased mother's final wish, King Charles reached a point of absolute clarity. The monarch realized that shielding his wife from the consequences of her actions would instantly shatter his bond with his eldest son and permanently undermine the moral authority of his reign. With a sharp, decisive movement, the king drew a formal custody decree across the desk and applied his signature. Under royal constitutional authority, this binding document stripped Queen Camilla of all administrative oversight regarding the private archives and personal property collections of the Crown, placing every item under neutral, independent management. Without delay, King Charles and Prince William exited the study and walked in solemn silence toward the deep subterranean vaults of Clarence House. Guided only by the low glow of corridor lights, father and son approached the reinforced oak doors, protecting the sovereign private correspondence collection. Behind them, Queen Camilla attempted to follow, desperate to intervene before the final evidence was uncovered. However, as she reached the security checkpoint outside the vault entrance, a senior officer stepped firmly into her path. She reached for her electronic access card and pressed it against the scanner, but the indicator light flashed red, emitting a sharp, metallic refusal tone. The security system had been updated instantly under the King direct order. Her privileged access credentials had been completely revoked. For several agonizing seconds, the Queen stood frozen in the cold stone hallway, repeatedly trying the keycard, while her own staff watched in uncomfortable silence. There was no argument to be made, no courtier to command, and no authority left to invoke. That quiet, public rejection outside a locked door marked the total collapse of the backstage power she had painstakingly cultivated over 3 decades. The institutional machinery that she had once maneuvered to conceal the past had turned against her in a single afternoon. Inside the climate-controlled interior of the vault, King Charles used his master key to unlock a heavy steel cabinet bearing the royal cipher. Moving aside stacks of century-old household correspondence, Prince William reached into the dark interior and retrieved a thick green envelope. Across its front, Princess Diana's fluid handwriting clearly displayed her son's name, held tight by an unbroken seal of blue wax. The envelope had remained untouched in the shadows since 1997, preserved inside a forgotten transfer box that no auditor had been permitted to open. With quiet reverence, the Prince of Wales held the letter that should have reached him when he was a teenager. At 43 years old, standing beside his father in the quiet vault, William broke the wax seal and unfolded the paper. As he read his mother's final written words, her voice seemed to echo across nearly 30 years of silence, outlining her fierce desire for her son to navigate his own future with love, courage, and independence. The deliberate theft of that moment, stolen from a grieving 15-year-old boy and kept hidden through his adulthood, hit the prince with immense emotional force, solidifying his resolve to bring absolute transparency back to her legacy. Returning to the study, King Charles placed the official audit ledger on the table beside the unsealed letter. Before his heir, the monarch affixed his royal signature to the completed audit report, formally validating the authenticity of Princess Diana's written wishes and restoring their absolute legal standing within the Crown estate records. By signing that document, the king formally recognized that the emerald bracelet and the accompanying letter belonged exclusively to Prince William's personal estate, ensuring that no administrative maneuvering or private office could ever challenge or hide his mother's legacy again. With the official audit report signed and the legal titles securely restored, Prince William made a swift, strategic decision regarding the fate of the emerald bracelet. Rather than locking the priceless heirloom back inside a dark vault or burying it beneath layers of security, the Prince of Wales chose to bring his mother's legacy directly into the daylight. He traveled to Kensington Palace and personally handed the velvet case, along with Princess Diana's handwritten letter to his wife, Princess Catherine. Reading the late princess' words, Catherine understood the profound weight of what had been stolen and the symbolic power of what was about to take place. Together, the couple agreed that the most effective way to defeat decades of secrecy was not through quiet press releases, but through an unmistakable public statement. The following morning provided the perfect stage. Princess Catherine arrived at a high-profile children's charity engagement held within the historic grounds of Kensington Palace, the very residence where Princess Diana had once lived and where the emerald bracelet had been improperly removed in 1997. As her car pulled up to the entrance, a crowd of hundreds had gathered along the perimeter railings, accompanied by dozens of international photojournalists. Stepping out into the bright afternoon sun, the Princess of Wales paused to greet the public. With a slow, deliberate movement, she raised her left hand to wave at the crowd. As her arm lifted, the tailored sleeve of her coat shifted back a few inches, exposing the deep green emeralds and glittering diamonds resting perfectly against her wrist. For a brief, breathtaking second, a stunned silence fell across the press line as veteran royal photographers recognized the iconic piece. Then, the collective clicking of camera shutters erupted like a storm. Within 20 minutes, high-definition images of Princess Catherine wearing the legendary bracelet were transmitted to newsrooms across the globe. News networks broke into regular broadcasts to display side-by-side comparisons of Princess Diana wearing the same repaired clasp in the 90s, alongside her daughter-in-law wearing it at Kensington Palace. Front pages of major global publications cleared their headlines to run sweeping photographs of the raised wrist, declaring in bold print that Princess Diana's long-lost emeralds had finally come home. The public reaction was swift, emotional, and overwhelming. Crowds began gathering outside the gates of Kensington Palace, laying fresh bouquets of flowers against the iron railings in a scene reminiscent of autumn 1997. Commentators and royal experts instantly connected the dots, praising Prince William for his unyielding pursuit of truth and his refusal to allow his mother memory to be managed or suppressed by palace advisors. The sudden, brilliant reappearance of the jewel created an unstoppable wave of public support for the Prince and Princess of Wales, transforming an administrative victory into a historic triumph of family devotion and moral legitimacy. Meanwhile, inside her private sitting room at Clarence house, Queen Camilla watched the television coverage unfold in total isolation. The television screen displayed endless loops of Princess Catherine's wrist, accompanied by live broadcasts explaining how the lost bracelet had been recovered following a rigorous internal audit. In previous years, her private office would have launched a counter-narrative, issuing subtle leaks or briefing sympathetic journalists to shift the public focus. But under the strict terms of the King's newly signed decree, her communications staff had been stripped of their authority regarding the matter, leaving her completely powerless to influence the media storm. She sat alone in the quiet room, watching the world celebrate the very legacy she had spent 27 years trying to keep in the dark. For the public and the monarchy alike, the brilliant green flashes of light on Princess Catherine's wrist carried a meaning far deeper than mere fashion or wealth. It was received as an absolute declaration of legitimacy, a sign that the authentic line of succession had reclaimed its history and restored respect to a mother-forgotten wish. By wearing the bracelet out in the open, the Princess of Wales did not just display a piece of historic jewelry, she fulfilled a promise made nearly 30 years late, proving that no amount of administrative concealment, locked drawers, or forged ledgers could ever extinguish the truth. Later that evening, King Charles III convened a final, solemn family council to formalize the official conclusions of the royal estate audit presented by Prince William. The binding ruling officially transferred sole legal ownership of the emerald bracelet into the private personal collection of the Prince of Wales, permanently shielding it from the Crown estate or any future administrative interference. Under the explicit terms of the decree, Queen Camilla was forever stripped of all authority, oversight, and representation regarding any letters, jewelry, or legacy records connected to Princess Diana. Furthermore, the Council established that the heirloom will eventually pass directly to Princess Charlotte, guaranteeing that Diana's legacy remains firmly anchored within her direct lineage. With this decisive judgment, the ancient order of the monarchy reasserted itself, restoring absolute transparency to a mother's suppressed wishes after nearly 3 decades of shadow and silence. The long-buried truth was finally laid bare, yet the wounds created along the way remained deeply unhealed. The public return of the emerald bracelet fulfilled a stolen promise from 30 years ago. But can the fractured bond between Prince William and Queen Camilla ever truly recover after such a devastating exposure of power, secrecy, and betrayal? How do you view King Charles III's handling of this domestic crisis and his willingness to enforce such a harsh penalty against his own queen? Share your thoughts and join the debate in the comments below. If you enjoyed this deep dive into royal history, power struggles, and behind-the-scenes drama, please consider hitting the subscribe button and turning on notifications so you never miss an episode.